Since 1945, the U.S. has led the world in upholding democracy and international law. Global and regional hegemons were prevented from arising due to U.S. dominance. The 1992 Defense Planning Guidance, which said that Washington will guard the international order and avoid new threats, is still relevant today. The Biden administration is giving the Indo-Pacific area top priority in its military policy, weapon systems, and acquisition planning, in accordance with the 2017 National Security Policy. The focus of the U.S. military in the 21st century is the Indo-Pacific Command's INDOPACOM domain. Today, we will be discussing why the U.S. is never afraid to beat China. Subscribe to us now before we continue. U.S. military might is built on a policy of punishment and denial as a deterrent. According to John Mearsheimer, punishment entails threatening to destroy an enemy's infrastructure, whereas denial persuades a foe that military goals won't be realized. Deterrence by punishment then relies on an enemy's fear of severe retaliation, whereas deterrence by denial concentrates on demonstrating that an enemy's endgame cannot be accomplished via more advanced integrated weapon systems, coordinated combat, and precise offensive firepower. Deterrence lowers hazards to the United States while shifting higher risk and costs on China. The U.S. involvement, according to Stephen Brooks and William Wolford, has restored stability to key regions. Overwhelming advantages exist between the U.S. and China. When it comes to GDP, technology, and military spending, the United States surpasses China. China's GDP represents 15% of the global GDP, whereas the United States accounts for 24%. In crucial fields including command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, C4ISR, and air, surface, and submarine weapon systems, the United States continues to possess a technological lead. Since the end of the Cold War, the U.S. has spent $19 trillion on its military. This spending is $16 trillion more than what China spent during the same time period, and almost as much as the rest of the globe combined. On every continent, the United States has engaged in both conventional and unconventional warfare. In addition to World War II, the United States has participated in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Panama War, the Grenada War, the First Gulf War, the Kosovo War, the Iraq War, and the Afghan War. Anywhere on Earth, the U.S. military can be sent at a moment's notice. Through military installations and defense alliances in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, the United States preserves strategic peace. Through airland battle, the United States established dominance in the post-Cold War world. As it gets ready for a sea-air battle, the U.S. is already relocating its military forces to the Indo-Pacific. Maritime dominance has been achieved by the U.S. Navy, USN. There are 11 carrier groups it runs. Having fought in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, the United States is on territory it is familiar with in the Indo-Pacific. 60% of the U.S. Navy, 55% of the U.S. Army, and 40% of the U.S. Marine Corps are comprised of INDOPACOM. Logistics. In addition to several agreements with private logistical transport companies, the United States has a separate military airlift command. The U.S. military has 516 stations and bases spread over 41 different nations. While China's defense spending is $180 billion annually, the United States spends $156 billion on 800 sites abroad. The U.S. military has outposts in Kuwait, Qatar, South Korea, Australia, Diego Garcia, and Italy. They keep 1 million different weapon systems in all. There are 160 nations where U.S. military personnel are stationed, and there are more than 15 where ground forces are really in use. The PLAN only has 12 supply ships with a combined tonnage of 330 tons, compared to the USN's 31 fast combat supply ships with a tonnage of 1.29 million tons. Nuclear. There are currently about 200 Chinese warheads, and over the next 10 years, that number is anticipated to triple. In contrast, the U.S. has 1,600 strategic weapons and about 4,000 better nuclear warheads. The United States keeps updating its nuclear arsenal, which is far more powerful than what would be necessary for nuclear retaliatory strikes against China. USAF. The USAF has air refueling aircraft, B-1 and B-2 bombers, F-15, F-16, and F-22 fighter jets stationed at Guam. Within 24 hours, the USAF Rapid Raptor program may globally deploy F-22s to any location. 44 missile interceptors are housed in concrete silos by the USAF in Alaska and California. The next generation stealth B-21 bomber, which will make its maiden flight in 2022, is also being built by the U.S. The JSSM-ER conventional cruise missile and the next generation long-range standoff stealth nuclear cruise missile will be mounted aboard the B-21. Worldwide partners. The network of U.S. alliances abroad has aided in promoting stability, promoting security, and preventing conflicts. A deterrent for China in the Indo-Pacific is the U.S.'s forward military presence and collaboration with its regional allies. While leading NATO, the United States also offers Japan and South Korea a defensive buffer. In addition to its 45 troops in Japan, the U.S. has 29 troops stationed in South Korea. In order to counter the threat posed by China, the Indo-Pacific democracies participating in the Quad exercises come together. United States and Australia, Philippines, Thailand, India, Singapore, Indonesia, and Vietnam also collaborate militarily on a bilateral basis. Reporters were informed by the head of the U.S. Third Fleet that whereas China's military drills likely involve less than 2 nations, the U.S. exercise involves 10. As was the case during the 2001 Afghanistan War, NATO would directly intervene in the event of a Chinese strike on the United States. Why China cannot compete with America? China's military might was ranked 5th in 2020 by People's Liberation Army, PLA. Major General Zhang Xiaozong, behind the United States, Russia, Britain, and France. Planned service power was ranked 8th, behind Japan and India. Due to its deficiency in 4th-generation fighter aircraft and advanced drones, the People's Liberation Army Air Force, PLAAF, was rated 7th in the world. According to General Xiaozong, China won't overtake the United States as the 2nd largest military power until it celebrates its centennial anniversary in 2049. The U.S. military as a financial dispersion. The primary component of economic deterrence is played by the U.S. military. Economic progress gives the Communist Party of China, CCP, legitimacy. The Small Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, ICBM, fleet China possesses may theoretically be used to attack Guam. The United States will launch numerous retaliatory attacks in response to the employment of ICBMs, completely destroying China's military and economic power centers. The U.S. and Maritime Strike Tomahawk Cruise Missile Block D will obliterate China's high-tech industries in a couple of hours by destroying coastal towns like Shanghai. Due to its lack of exposure to a nuclear warfare strategy used by the U.S. and Russia, the CCP leadership lacks knowledge in nuclear concerns. China's nuclear strategy is centered on minimum deterrence, a form of low-level deterrence, and its nuclear arsenal is still modest and exposed. It is not possible to threaten the United States with 200 nuclear weapons. China and the United States are comparable in size geographically. However, because of the concentration of its vital infrastructure on the coastlines, rather than being distributed like the U.S. infrastructure, China's economy would be completely destroyed by a handful of U.S. nuclear weapons. A war will result in a loss of $310 billion USD in exports from China to the United States. A people's revolution and an economic meltdown will emerge from the war's effects on industrial production, unemployment, and inflation. As was the case with World War II, the United States will reap the benefits of the conflict and achieve reversal economic gains, leading to strong employment and industrial expansion. The lack of experience in fighting wars. China lacks the analytical learning process that is in place in the United States 32. The U.S. military has a good record of lessons learned, including doctrines, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Since the Boxer Revolution during the China campaign, the U.S. military has been compiling lessons learned. China has never had great generals. whereas the U.S. military has been commanded by brilliant military leaders like George Marshall, Dwight Eisenhower, George Patton, and David Petraeus. Instead of China's military colleges, the rest of the world sends its military officers to U.S. military institutions. The projection of powerlessness. A superpower differs from others in that it can project power. China has attempted, with varying degrees of success, to convince U.S. allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific area to side with China, starting with its Charm Offensive and continuing with the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. 35 China lacks a global presence because it lacks international defense agreements and logistics sites with military supplies. It would be challenging to enlist Pakistan's military assistance in a conflict with the United States because China's dependable ally has been reluctant to sever its military relations with the U.S. The A-6K, China's sole bomber, was reverse-engineered from a Tu-16 bomber that the Soviet Union created in the 1950s. Hawaii cannot be attacked by the aircraft, even when armed with CJ-10 cruise missiles. The A-6K can go 3,800 miles. However, the distance to Hawaii from the nearest A-6K base is 5,157 miles. The C-4 ISR systems of the U.S. will identify the bomber on the open seas, preventing the A-6K from attacking adjacent U.S. bases. Because of their inability to match its range, PLAAF fighters are unable to escort the bombers. This finishes our today's video. Share your opinions with us in the comments. And do subscribe to us now for more amazing videos like this. Thanks for watching.